Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up, yeah. I'm Julie Dobrow. I'm the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at the School of the Arts at Columbia. I'm also a proud alum of the Theater Management and Producing program. So I've been around Columbia School of the Arts for a very long time, and it is near and dear to my heart. So thank you so much for attending this information session about our Film and Media Studies MA program. Just to show you, oh, for some reason that's not letting me advance. There we go. So that's me, just to show you the faces that will be on the call tonight, and then we'll get rid of the slides and we can all just look at each other's faces, which is better. First, we'll hear from Nico Baumbach, who is the director of the Film and Media Studies program right now and an associate professor in the program. We also have on the call Rob King, who is a professor, and we have two current students, Anne and Hui Yoon. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And then we'll go into some nitty gritty about the application deadlines and financial aid and all of that stuff. So I'm going to hand it over to Nico, and he will tell you a little bit more about the program.
Thank you so much, Julie, and everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, so thanks so much for coming. I will, you guys will probably have questions. I'd love to answer questions. I'm a professor in the program. I'm the director of the MA program. I've been teaching at Columbia for over 10 years, and I've been working very closely with the MA program the entire time. So I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have. I thought the first thing I would start with is just give you a general idea of the requirements and expectations in the program. So the program is basically set up where there are two tracks. One is the cinema media track, and the other is the emergent media track. And I'll start by saying a little bit about the first track, and then in a bit turn things over to Rob King, who will talk more about the second track. But one thing to mention up front, and we have a couple students here, a former student and a current student who can talk about this as well, is there's a lot of integration between the two tracks. It's not as if these are two separate programs, but they're two directions you can go in. And the cinema and media track is in some ways the more traditional film studies track, though it's also informed by media studies very much. And the big difference between this and the other track are different requirements. So one thing about our program is we have a full year of classes and then a semester where you work on your thesis and you take a thesis class. So it's a 1.5-year program. And in that first year, whichever track you take, you'll take 2 required classes. And if you take the cinema and media media track, you'll take a cinema historiography class and then a seminar in film and media theory. So historiography and theory are 2, we say, core classes that give you a kind of grounding in the field. And then you take 3 additional classes each of those semesters. And those involve a range of graduate seminars in film and media studies. Sometimes people take classes outside our program too. If you're interested in a whole range of things, you have access to classes at Columbia, graduate classes that are not strictly in our program, but may relate to the kind of work you want to do in film and media studies. So those could involve, say, a class in art history or in East Asian studies or in French or in the English department or something along those lines. But the bulk of your classes are going to be with the film and media studies faculty. And one thing I think that is somewhat unique about our MA program is that we do have this additional semester for a thesis. And so you come out of the program having produced something substantial. So there's the year of intense coursework, and then the semester where you're really writing and thinking about your own project. And so that's what happens in that last third semester that you're in the program. So maybe that's a sort of general idea of the cinema and media track. I can certainly say more about aspects of it. But maybe Rob could present the emergent media track. And this is something we started a few years ago, in part because as we've become a program that both does more traditional film studies, but also looks at media, we have more and more students coming in who are interested in gaming and AI and social media and aspects of media studies that are very much about the current moment and transformations happening. And so we've developed this other track specifically for those students. So maybe I'll turn things over to Rob now to say something about that.
Thanks, Nico. I too am a professor here of film and media studies. I'm the director of undergraduate studies in my when I'm not on leave, as I am at the moment. But I wanted to say a few words about the emergent media stream within the MA program, which, as Nico mentioned, was introduced about 5 years ago. The emergent media stream is designed to look at, I suppose, related moving image phenomena that aren't necessarily cinema or movies, by which we mean things like video games or virtual reality, augmented reality, Internet of Things, and so on and so forth. So its focus is different. It's also a little bit different in terms of what you actually do in classes. The MA in Cinema and Media Studies is very much kind of studies and academic in orientation, and that's true of the emergent media stream as well, albeit that, excuse me, the emergent media stream allows for more creative applications, small scale, but nonetheless creative applications that you'll pursue in class. In terms of brass tacks, the difference between the emergent media and the cinema and media streams is, aside from the difference in focus, obviously, is primarily a difference in terms of the required classes. So in your first semester as an emergent media student, you will be taking new media art. In your second semester, you will be taking media archaeology. You'll also take one of our 4 classes in digital storytelling. It's up to you to choose which. There are options there that range from world building to transmedia storytelling and so on and so forth. Interactivity in media as well. And then, as per the cinema and media stream, you do a thesis at the end of it. Graduates from our program have come from and gone on to careers in the tech industry, if that's of interest, places like TikTok and the like. And well, actually, in fact, one of our recent graduates, who I can see right on the screen there, she went on to work at the United Nations, where she wrote the Governing for AI for Humanity. She's too modest, obviously, to say that. But these are some of the things that you can go on and accomplish with a MA in film and media studies with the emergent media stream. Maybe that would be a good time to throw it over to you, Hui, though.
Thank you, Professor King. Hi, my name is Hui. I'm MA Studies in Emerging Media track, class of 2024. Yeah, so I was in the emerging media track, but I took an interesting path because I actually took both of the required courses for the cinema and film history and emergent media, which as Professor Bromberg mentioned, that it's a lot of them actually like seep in together and really intertwine. And for me, my career pathway also was heavily influenced from that because it really echoes a lot. You get to see very practical, you get to have like very practical classes as well, not only in the film and media studies category, but also you could like go into MFA courses. Like you could like select some MFA courses, and you could also do a lot of um immersive, like experimental courses when it comes to filmmaking or even game designs. Some of my colleagues, they also took a lot of heavy literature courses as well when they were really interested in cinema history. A good friend of mine actually took a heavy, like a seminar course on Virginia Woolf, which I think influenced her thesis as well. So there's like a lot of interesting paths that you could take, which I think is a strong point of this course. Um, yeah, it's great. The cohort's nice. I'm not sure about how the size it is for this year, but from my experience, our cohort, it was about a little over 20 people. So it was an amazing thing. But I think like every year changes, so I can't be sure of the numbers. It's amazing. You get to really be in this setting, like a very safe setting where a lot of great minds are discussing about different interests that really impacts you and influences you. My thesis as well, I talked about AI and human communication, but it actually was influenced heavily from my colleagues who also talked about conspiracy theories in America. So that's where I kind of like got into this how AI and TikTok algorithms are impacting people's psyche, and also about censorship from the Hays Code and all of that jazz. Like that also impacted my studies on how like words and linguistics are changing on TikTok, because like they're trying to kind of pull off the censorship, and that's actually impacting the vernacular and then how people are thinking in this digital era. So you get to have like these amazing chances of like expanding your perspective. And also the faculties, the professors are always there. They're always there to support you and have amazing sources. I remember like bugging Professor Bombeck and Professor King and a bunch of other professors, just like asking if there's anything more to read, and they're always there for you. And it's very exciting. And we also have a lot of events that you could see, a great screening events. We also have like collaborative events with other programs. We have like an annual screening event with the East Asian Studies, where if you're interested in East Asian cinema, you get to see amazing filmmakers coming in and really talking about the works. And it's just great. I think I went too much. Sorry. Yeah.
Great. No, that was super helpful. Thank you. And there'll be an opportunity to ask our students questions later. If so, start thinking about what you'd like to know from the student's perspective. Anne, did you want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, right. Thank you, Hui. I think you basically covered all of the aspects in our program. And I too am very thankful of like the experience I had here. I'm currently in my second year, so I'm working on my 50-page thesis right now. I would say it was great. So like what we just said about like the large number of electives throughout the university you can choose from, everything. And I think I'll talk a bit about like career paths maybe just to add a bit to it. So like aside from a lot of our students moving into academia, like pursuing their PhDs and so, we also have like students being directors and also moving into film distribution. So I think this program is very packed and surrounded for all kinds of like career outcomes if you're interested in like paths outside of academia. And we also share the all the resources of what School of the Arts have. So we are very closely bonded to the film program. We got to see all the a lot of free screenings and a lot of director Q&As all together. And I think that was very helpful for my own growing here and really getting like an inner point of view of how like a lot of the films I'm interested in is made, and it also influenced my thesis writing. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. I guess I will take it back just to give you some general information about admissions and financial aid. So I'm going to share my screen again just because I have a few slides that might be helpful. Let's see. Hopefully you can all see that now. Can you all see that? Wait. Okay. Most important is the deadline. The application deadline is Tuesday, January 14th, and that's at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please, please, please get it in on time. I'm short of some kind of emergency. We really need the applications in on time so that the faculty can start reviewing them and everyone has the same fair shot. So that is the deadline. The School of the Arts financial aid application and the FAFSA deadline. So that is if you are interested in receiving scholarship support from the school. Domestic students and permanent residents need to submit 2 applications. So it's the FAFSA, which is the federal application that entitles you to federal loans, et cetera. And then the School of the Arts has our own financial aid application. That's for both domestic students and international. And both of those are due on Saturday, February. Oh, it's actually not a Saturday. I believe it's a Tuesday, but it's February 4th. That's the correct date. And the important thing to realize is admissions decisions are made completely independently of your need. So don't, be shy. Don't be reluctant to submit an application if you are looking for scholarship support. It will not affect your chances of whether or not you are accepted to the program. So there's some forms of student support. As I mentioned before, there's scholarships. Unfortunately, there's very limited scholarships for the MA program. We do have a few, but there aren't a ton. It's certainly worth submitting those applications and applying for them. And they are based on a combination of need and merit. So the applications will give us a sense of what your need situation is, and the merit is determined by the faculty admissions committee that is reviewing your application. We also have service positions in the School of the Arts. These are jobs ranging from faculty assistants to working at the Lenfest Center for the Arts, to working on the marketing team, et cetera. Those pay between $22.50 and $25 an hour, and they're very flexible in terms of hours, so you can work them around your class schedule. There's also TA positions. They offer a $4,300 scholarship plus a salary of $2,432, and that's all paid in the semester in which you are a TA. In addition, there's federal work study for U.S. citizens and domestic residents. I'm sorry, and permanent residents. And there's also other jobs at Columbia. So if you're an international student, you can either do a service position or there's other jobs throughout the university that you qualify for. All positions have a limit of 20 hours a week, except when you are on break, you can work up to 40 hours a week. And just one other category, we have emergency aid. If you're in a situation in which, something happens with your apartment and, something like that, that's truly an emergency. We have a process to apply for emergency aid to help get you through that challenging time. And I just wanted you to see the admissions and financial aid staff. If you have any questions over the next several months, we are the people that respond to the emails and the phone calls that come in. We're all on this call. So I'm Julie. Kenny's here. Kenny, you want to wave? Kenny Wong, he's our Director of Admissions and Financial Aid. We have Niquette Johnson, who is our Admissions and Financial Aid Officer. Wave, Niquette. And then Tori Sheffer, who is our admissions assistant. So we're a small office, small but mighty, but we do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. And please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions or concerns that you may have as you go through the process. And this is our contact information. So this is the best way to reach us. We can put this in the chat as well. And I'm gonna get rid of the screen share and hand it back over to Nico and Rob, who can facilitate any questions there may be.
So I guess, any questions?
It looks like there's at least one in the chat. So, if we can make it pretty informal, if you want to raise your hand or raise your Zoom hand or put it in the chat, we'll try to monitor them as well as we can.
So I can see a question from Justin Anderson here. For those interested in developing cinematic experiences through new media, how in depth can the technical side be? For instance, might you learn how to build LLMs or neural networks, or how to leverage such emergent media on a production schedule? We're not building neural networks here, not yet anyway. The emergent media side of things does not require any coding knowledge. For example, although some kind of basic primers in terms of coding sometimes built into those specific classes, ordinarily what you're going to be doing when it comes to like creative work is you're going to be working on prototype ideas of things that you may then be able to implement, right? And maybe just kind of sketching them out in a kind of quick and dirty fashion using some online tools, whether it's building an interactive story or developing an interactive storyboard through something like Twine, for example, or something along those lines. So the creativity aspect of it is not a matter of kind of immersing yourself into, you're not going to be sent into the volume and create a 360-degree movie like you're making The Mandalorian or something like that. It is going to be small scale because it is still very much a studies oriented class. It's degree. It's very much academic in orientation. Does that answer your question, Justin? Maybe. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Sure thing. I can jump onto some of the other questions. Everyone can hear me. Lauren Toledo asked, for this program, is it quite an interdisciplinary department? Also, does it have an impact on your admission if you've had a film background in undergrad? Yeah, so that's a good question. One of the things I think our program makes available is the possibility of having a rather interdisciplinary approach to film studies, in the sense that we are film and media studies. You can take a very wide range of classes, not just in our own department. And so, we gave that example of somebody taking a class on Virginia Woolf who might have been doing something in relation to cinema and, the novel or something like that. So there is that possibility. And yet there's also a certain emphasis in learning a kind of grounding in film and media studies or the basics of emergent media, if you're on that track. And so I would say, as a general rule, it helps to have had a film background in undergrad. That's certainly something we're looking at if you have a film background. But we have absolutely also made exceptions. I mean, with people who have a very interesting approach, have an impressive background that's not strictly film studies or even primarily film studies. We have accepted people into the program who that wasn't their major, that wasn't their main emphasis, but they want to turn to it from some other angle that they've been working from. So I would say it can certainly help to have a strong film background when you're applying, but it's not. There's certainly many exceptions, I would say, in the application process. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Rob. The next question are any of the film MA people on the creative production side of filmmaking, how could an MA serve their career goals? So that's a good question too, in the sense that we do share a floor with an MFA program, a filmmaking program. And there is some integration, but we are also distinct. So as Rob mentioned earlier about the emergent media, certainly true of the cinema media, if you're doing an MA in film and media studies, you're doing a scholarly MA, you're doing an academic MA. And so there isn't an enormous amount of opportunity to do actual filmmaking. There's a little more, as Rob mentioned, production on the emergent media side. But one thing I would not advise is to apply for the MA as a kind of backdoor into the MFA program. We're interested in people who want to think about film, want to write about film, want to analyze aspects of media and what's going on in the world. So it's not the emphasis isn't on creative production in filmmaking. That said, we often have people who are very interested in filmmaking who want to do an MA and find that the kind of work they do in the MA informs their filmmaking. And so we have had a number of people from the MA go on to become filmmakers. Um, but the MA is not a filmmaking program, so that should be, I think, quite clear. And in terms of career goals, we have had people go on and become film critics, curators, and we've had a number of students, quite a lot of students, go on to do PhDs and have gotten into, we've had, people get into pretty much every, top PhD program in the country in cinema and media studies, but that's not everybody's path. And as we can testify, right, we've had some students go on to the United Nations. So there's certainly a range of ways in which the MA informs people's career goals. If anyone else wants to jump in on any of these questions, I'm happy to, if there are additional comments.
Actually, there was one thing that I forgot to mention that I wanted to add in, which isn't specific to emergent media. It's actually something for that everyone can participate in. But the emergent media program is closely linked to the digital storytelling lab at Columbia. And that also has opportunity for student work there. To work alongside the media artist Lance Weiler, who is one of our instructors and who runs the digital storytelling lab. This is the lab is really the public-facing side of what we do with new media at the School of the Arts here. It has a series of monthly meetups that are open to anyone who wants to go, the public included. Those are hosted at Lincoln Center. It has an annual awards ceremony, the Digital Dozen, which you can find about at the lab, as well as a series of other events like Story IO and so on and so forth. So this is just another aspect of things. Regarding the question of careers, I mean, Nico already mentioned that, and it's true that the people who go on who take an MA, I mean, the obvious pathway from an MA is to go straight into a PhD. But that's not to say that that's the only pathway or the one that's most advised or best. That depends on the individual. People who have been in our MAs, they go on to careers in film curating, in film preservation and restoration, to work as critics, to work in distribution companies. In one instance, I can think of someone who then worked for a talent agent, and so on and so forth. So the whole spectrum of possibilities for what you can do with an MA degree is reflected in what our graduates have gone on to do.
The next question I'm seeing is from Adam. For the cinema and media track, does the thesis course aim for publication of the thesis? We don't aim for that, in the sense that that's not primarily what we're thinking about. I mean, the goal isn't presented as publication. Which is true, frankly, of dissertations and PhD programs as well. We have had a number of people who have, in some cases, taken part of their MA and published an article. Recently, I don't know if you know this, Rob, but Peyton McCarty-Simus
You were going to mention that.
published a book from, in fact, not her thesis, but from a paper she wrote for my seminar. But extending it into a sort of book-length essay. So it certainly happens, but we don't frame it that way. The intention is really to think about a project where you're working through some problem in an academic setting. And it's obviously can be great if that's something that you then want to publish, but it's not. We don't frame it that way. What should I expect if I want to deepen my studies further by pursuing a PhD after this master's program? So we do have, quite a number of students who apply for PhD programs. As I mentioned, we've had a lot get into excellent PhD programs too. And we've had a number now of former students who are now professors in various places. And, so we do meetings where we discuss the PhD process, we discuss the application process. We have a sort of support system set up for students who are interested in pursuing that route, and we want to guide you through that process. So that's very much something that we're thinking about. And the MA in many cases can be a kind of testing ground for some students. Do I want to, it's a 1 year plus program, 1.5 years, and it's a chance to sort of, in some cases, be like, well, maybe I want to pursue a PhD, and this is a program that will help me get into a good PhD, but it'll also give me the opportunity to see if this is what I really want to do. Do I want to spend time beyond the experience of the MA, becoming an academic? Like, is this my it's a place to sort of test the extent to which you want to make that pursuit. And I think some students feel it very deeply, and for some people, the MA is really what they wanted, rather than the sort of more long-term experience. But we are very eager to guide you through that process if that's the direction you want to go in. And as Rob mentioned, it depends on the individual student. Some do, some don't, and we have a range of different directions that students are interested in going from the MA program. Are we allowed to combine writing samples to meet the 10-page requirement for the 2 samples? I'm not looking at the exact requirements on the application at the moment. I don't know if you remember these offhand, Rob.
I think it would be fine to combine like 2 documents into a 10-page document. There's nothing to prevent it. It'll be read just the same. Yeah. Ian, yes, I see you had wait, the question's vanished. Oh, how important is it to have a letter of recommendation from a past professor for the program? I understand your position. I think it's a position that many people are in. I think it's understandable that you might not be able to have like 3 letters of recommendation from like instructors who may not remember you well. But if you can, if you can get an old professor to write a letter for you, I think that would be definitely advisable. That would be my advice, because in general, I would say that it doesn't necessarily look strong in terms of an application if the 3 letters that you provide are all from kind of outside the sphere of the thing that you're applying for. So if you could like chase up your old professors, I'm sure they wouldn't mind. I get these kind of requests all the time.
Just so you know, if you've graduated within the past 5 years, then we do actually require at least 1 letter to be from a faculty member from your undergraduate program. If you graduate later, as Rob said, it's still a great thing to have, but we don't require it.
Also, as to the Stoll, your question about the 2025 Columbia Film Festival, the specific dates probably aren't up yet. But absolutely, you can attend in person and online. I don't think there is any online component of this anymore, but you would be more than welcome. People would be delighted to have MA students participating in that event.
Seeing a question for those making a shift from a non-film BA, does our writing sample need to be from the context of a class? If it's up to academic standards, can it be about television? And this is a little bit like the recommendation question. I think, if you have writing samples that are related to film, that it would make sense to include one of those. Certainly television counts, because we are a film and media program. We teach classes in television. That's certainly part of what we're doing. But again, it's also a question of the individual student in some cases. I think so I was saying earlier about coming from a non-film background, and the personal statement allows you to do this. If you make a really convincing case that what you've been doing outside film is really interesting in a way that you'll bring it to your film studies, you can make a very compelling case in some cases. But if it really seems like you don't have the background, and you can't make that case, then it's then the application's not going to stand out in the same way. So it's really a question of the individual student. But we have had a lot of students who we've accepted, and excellent students who haven't come from a film studies BA, and there's no requirement that your sample has to be specifically about film.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also add that an essay on television, I would consider that to be an essay on cinema and media. It doesn't seem like that would be like unusual or in any way kind of eccentric. I mean, I do remember when my undergraduate degree, for example, was classics, and I started doing film and media studies when I was at the MA level. And I remember, thinking, probably no one in film and media is going to really want to read my essay on the poetry of Virgil or something like that. So I wrote a little essay on a film and just submitted that instead. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but like if you feel that, if you feel that the well is dry in terms of stuff that you can use for an application, it doesn't need to have like some kind of rubber stamp that this was submitted for a class at a university or anything along those lines. See, Sarah has the hot button question about the campus protests and stuff like that. So just to touch on those, this year has been, I will admit that I've been on leave this past fall. But I would say that while the campus, the main gates to campus have remained closed, or rather for ID only entry, there has been virtually nothing of what happened in the past spring. I mean, isolated instances. There are always some protests happening on and off, but it is definitely, it feels like a campus that has turned the corner. Although you will be starting at Columbia in the second tenure of Donald Trump, so I can't promise that there won't be any controversies happening during your time here. But I would like to think that, especially like speaking to your status as an Israeli student, or if you're asking for someone else, that I think that there should not be a problem, not with the climate at the moment.
Any other questions? I think we got through most of them in the chat, but feel free to raise your hands or your Zoom hands if we missed you. Any other questions for our two students?
I, th I think there's a question specifically for Nico about visiting professors. Or, wait, no, on visiting professors for this academic year.
Would you read it to me, Rob? Because I don't see it at the moment. But
Could you please share insights on the visiting professors for this academic year and highlight any specialty courses or seminars offered that are unique to this term or recent terms in the cinema and media studies track?
yeah, so we've had you could probably speak to this a little bit as well, Rob, because I'll probably not remember everything in the moment, but we've had a lot of I would say yeah, pretty great people coming through who are not part of our full-time faculty. So next semester, for example, right, we have Jim Hoberman, known as Jay Hoberman, and his writing, film critic and scholar, teaching a class in documentary modes. In the yeah, who do we have currently teaching adjunct graduate classes?
We recently had Yvonne Margulies teaching a class in the film of Chantal Ackerman, and continuing in the kind of francophone wave. We have another visiting professor this year who's teaching an author studies class on Agnes Varda. We should be offering a class in the year that you'll be joining related to some aspect of Brazilian cinema. I think maybe Cinema Novo, that'll be taught by Richard Pena, formerly a professor here at Columbia, since retired, subsequently returning because we can't keep him away. So that's some of what we're offering at the undergraduate level in terms of emergent media. We've had Shah Simpson. They're actually an active author of choose your own adventure, like the real choose your own adventure stories, that you buy in I don't know where you get them now, bookshops, but also discount bins and stuff like that, teaching like interactive storytelling, so you get to have that from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So those are some that immediately come to mind. To Justin's question, if your best academic papers are in a field other than film, would it hurt your application, or do admission consider the writing style even if the topics are different? It depends what you mean by a field other than film, I suppose. If we're talking about a field that is related to the humanities, let's say it's an English paper or something like that, that I think that that's definitely something that we could that we could make sense of and understand. If it's a paper in astrophysics, I'm sure I would have no ability to tell whether that was a good or a bad paper. So maybe you should submit your astrophysics paper. I don't know.
We've definitely occasionally, had an application where somebody submits a math paper or something, and I can't say that helps.
No, I was being facetious. And also, actually, one other thing, please don't submit a script, like a short script for a film, because again, even though that might seem as though it's film related, it's really not the kind of film studies that we do in our program. And I think that a more studies oriented paper would be definitely preferable to something like that. Although, Nico, you're going to say.
Well, I was going to say also, since part of the thing with there being two paper submissions is, if you are somebody who has taken a film class, you do have a film paper, but you feel your best work is in a class you took on English literature or something like that, you do have the opportunity then to submit both, right? So we see, maybe your best, what you feel is your best written work, but also that you've written on film or media and in some form. So you can sort of mix it up with the two paper submissions as part of the application.
We have a hand raised from Ian.
Hi, this might be kind of an odd question, but would it be acceptable to write the personal statement in like a creative, non-traditional style to express our story, or does it need to follow kind of a formal, more traditional approach? I think it's like the 6-page max personal statement on the application.
It does have to follow, the maximum number of pages and all of that and everything like that. In some ways it depends what you mean by non-traditional or there's absolutely something to the fact that many of the personal statements can feel too formulaic, where people are just sort of saying the things that they think you're supposed to say, and we're reading a lot of applications and all of them kind of sound the same, and then we read somebody who their the way they're presenting things really stands out, and that can be very helpful. If it's extremely experimental, there's maybe some risk there that we might not quite know where you're coming from, or so it's a little hard to judge in the abstract. But I think certainly, I think of the personal statements as a place where you are at some level making the case that you're somebody who wants to do this program. You're invested in doing this kind of work, right? And so we get a sense of you. We get a sense of your personality. We get a sense of where you're coming from, and we get a sense that is this somewhere you belong? Is this somewhere where we feel like you're somebody who wants to be here and do the kind of work that we're really thinking about film and media, and so so you want to have those aspects in there, right? That kind of there's a little bit of selling yourself, and obviously, but it's a personal statement that's interestingly written, that conveys something about you that makes you stand out from other applications, can certainly be a great asset, I think.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Looks like there's one more question at the bottom. If we do,
any MA students been punished for participation in protests? Rob is off this semester. I was off last year, so but my understanding is no.
Yeah, that is mine as well. I answered that one in the chat. I'm not aware of any punishment for School of the Arts students. There's another question. If we do work that is discussing film and video form, is there, hold on, just went up. Is there a space for value in sharing that in an application? That's from Maxwell.
That's a very good question. And the answer for that would be yes, albeit that it would have to be arranged in consultation with the professor. Whether they would permit like a final assignment to be a video essay as opposed to a written essay.
The question is about the application specifically. So that.
That is interesting. I think that there would certainly be a place for sharing that in the application. You could just put the links in your resume, right? But I'm not sure that that would substitute for the expected written assignments.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Question from Gavin.
Hi, thank you so much for answering. I'm gonna lower my hand. But thank you so much for answering the question in the chat. What I specifically wanted to ask from Professors King and Bomback is about in regards to kind of political activism, participation, and everything like that. Have there been MA students in the particularly in the emergent media section that have focused on this intersection of how media and activism or media and politics have kind of intersected in these past few years?
Well, that's an excellent question. We have a class taught by Jim Hoberman that is on precisely that topic, like documentary activism. So the answer is yes.
I mean, I would say, yeah, that's a topic that a lot of students are interested in. I'm not aware specifically of students who have done projects focusing on it, the protests at Columbia specifically, but more broadly about video and activism is something that a lot of students work on.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, that perfectly answers the question. Thank you both.
Any other
anything
questions?
here?
I put the email address for the admissions office. If you have any questions between now and the deadline, please feel free to reach out to us. I can put it in the chat again because it's probably all the way up at this point. But you have a little bit of time for your application. It's due, I think it's which is this one? February 15th, I think. I'm sorry, January 15th. Sorry, we have lots of different applications, but anyway, that's the 14th, January 14th. Yeah, we look forward to receiving your application, and we're in the office all the time. So please, if you have any questions or concerns, do not hesitate to reach out.
I was just going to answer. There's one question about media regarding architecture, and Anne Wang answered it very well. But Anne mentioned the comparative media Center for Comparative Media, and that's something people might want to look at because there are quite a number of people who work on architecture and media in that center who aren't part of our program directly, but are professors you could take classes with outside our program. And it gives a sense of the wider range of media studies at Columbia that students do have the opportunity to work with that are not specifically in our program. So it's certainly something worth checking out, the Center for Comparative Media at Columbia.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? All right, thank you all so much for coming. I would say coming tonight, but you may be the morning where you are. In either case, we really appreciate you tuning in. And any other questions you have, please reach out to us. And we hope to see your applications. Thank you.